So, Zuby,
Yo.
you recently had a conversation with Piers Morgan.
Yeah, I did, man. Yeah.
How is Piers in real life?
I've met Piers 4 times now.
Right, okay.
Been on his show 4 times all this year, actually.
Right.
He was polite and friendly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm very much I was very much raised to treat people politely and with respect.
Is he one
Even
of those,
more so people who are older than me.
Is
right?
he one of those guys who's a different persona when he's on air and off air?
I haven't spent enough time with him privately to totally judge that. But in person, he's friendly, amiable, polite, whatever. There's certainly, even when he does interviews, I feel like there's like different versions of him. Do you get that, right? Like sometimes you'll watch an interview and you'll be like, yeah, that was a really good conversation and very fair, and you let the person speak and whatever. And then there's other ones where it's like, I mean, the appearance I did last week, I don't think I completed a sentence without being interrupted.
Yeah.
But I've been on his show previous times where actually I was able to finish my sentences and not be. So I don't quite know. I don't really have a gauge there. And something maybe worth saying is that the very first time I was ever on his show, right before I went on it, we just had a back and forth on Twitter about his stance during the whole scamdemic era. Because he said some truly, truly awful and horrible things about millions and millions of people, which is why
he was a key instigator in making the government U-turn.
Yes, he was. And I still want to have a conversation with him about that. Right. So there were people last week who were criticizing me for not bringing. I'm like, dude, this is a 5-minute segment. The topic is decided. I'm not going to just randomly jump in here and start I'd love to have. He knows I want to have that conversation with him, because I don't think he has. I don't think he's genuinely apologized for it and apologized his wrongdoing and the amount of people let me not say directly, because then I'm using the way he tried to frame Alex Jones. The amount of people he indirectly harmed through his rhetoric.
Millions of people.
Absolutely. Yes.
But also the way that he kind of apologized for it. It's like, well, I was wrong. I've just changed my mind. Yeah. The science changed. I'm not to blame for any of this.
Yeah, so
and there were 90-year-olds who died in solitary confinement without their family around them because of what you did, you bloody scumbag.
Yeah, so I want to, I have not, quote unquote, forgiven that aspect yet. I'd actually really like to have him on my podcast next year, not just to discuss this, but certainly to bring it up. And look, the thing with him is, he loves holding other people accountable.
I know.
He loves holding up. Right. I've seen his interviews, whether it's with an Andrew Tate or it's with a pro-Palestine person, right? And I know he has no problem with holding people accountable. He has no problem holding Alex Jones accountable. And I'm like, bro, you have also said, right, by your own logic and arguments, like when we were talking about the quote unquote hate speech, and he's saying, Alex Jones is engaged in this and whatever. I'm like, look, by the view of millions of people out there, you did the same. We can literally pull up the tweets. We can go back to listen to some of these programs. You were talking about unvaccinated. No. He said unvaccinated people should be denied NHS care. He said unvaccinated people should not be able to travel, should not be able to do X, Y, and Z, should not have the same rights as other people.
Well, and just the lockdown
right?
alone,
that's like some dark
suicides
stuff.
that led to of teenagers.
I think there's a huge gap as well, morally, between advocating lockdowns and mask mandates and saying that people should have their rights stripped from them.
That's only because there is an obvious one. Andrew Neil was another one.
Yeah, and he did the latter. So, I mean, look, like I said, I'm a professional, right? If I'm invited to go on someone's program or whatever, I'm not
You've been well raised, and so you don't spurg out and act inappropriately.
Exactly. And I also think that, look, I would like to change his mind on this. I would like to actually be instrumental in that. So what the people who were screaming at me for taking a selfie with him don't realize is, okay, you can
We'll get to that because that was just bonkers. But anyway, before we go on and talk about your appearance on Piers Morgan, we had Count Dankula on our Lads Hour the other day, who had also been on Piers Morgan for basically the same reason. Because Piers, for some reason, was weirdly committed to the no, these people should be censored position. These are always great. This is basically like The View for Men. It's really good fun. But anyway, let's move on, right? So this I just found absolutely fascinating, right? And if it wasn't for the fact that the words Piers Morgan Uncensored were on every single part of the screen at all times, I probably wouldn't take such objection to it because, of course, I kind of expect this from Piers Morgan, right? But I figured that we'd just watch a little bit of this clip just to contextualize what's happening.
Would you let Nick Fuentes back on?
Yes. Absolutely.
Really? A white supremacist anti-Semite?
Yeah, as long as he doesn't break the rules.
Well, those are breaking the rules.
No, having views, having thoughts in your head is not against the law.
What about
or
saying
breaking the rules
on his show?
If you say things on the platform that violate the platform,
and if you promote your show and you say them on your show,
well,
if I started spewing white supremacist stuff now in front of you, right, and I then tweeted a
you as a black
show,
person,
you'd be happy with
can't bear to hear.
That was patronising.
Yeah, totally.
Really? So I can look down the barrel of this camera and say, I think all black people should be thrown out of this country.
Watch how they clip this one.
Well, no, okay. So then someone will clip it, right? And I could say that,
yes.
And then I could tweet a link to this show.
I was like, if I were a bad actor,
and you would think I should stay on X.
Yes, I would support your right to free speech.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not free speech, it's hate speech.
No, hate speech, Zuby.
Freedom of speech specifically exists to protect views and people espousing views.
But there are 6 different criteria excluded under the First Amendment, including child pornography, including defamation, including all sorts of things. You can't famously go into a theatre and shout.
You actually can do that.
Yeah, you can.
Right?
Sure, but you can say
so there are lots of restrictions already.
Look, there are people who think that I engage in hate speech. There's people who think that you engage in hate speech. Hate speech is a very subjective, it's an extraordinarily subjective term. And if anyone who has ever said anything,
so for you, there's no
decades,
limit. Anyone can say anything.
I don't think you can directly call to violence.
Right.
No.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I thought I'd announce that we have a new line of merch. This is our aesthetics collection. So I was thinking that in the face of AI art debasing the very concept of art, actually we'd do something quite positive. So we commissioned a series of paintings that were actually really beautiful and could be something that we could present outside of politics. So for example, we have this magnificent painting of a ship weathering a storm, which I thought was just really nice. And we have, of course, a glorious, sort of surrealist, giant white tiger drinking from a lake. But also there are other things that are just kind of interesting, such as the chap lost in cyberspace, or something that I thought might, in time for Christmas, make a great present to your mum or something like that. A beautiful cat lounging on some clouds. Basically, we wanted to do some stuff that wasn't just political. So things that were just nice and beautiful and interesting, because that's also a part of the world we want to curate. So you can go over to shop.lotuses.com. Buying the merch is a really great way of supporting us and means that we can live past demonetization. And I'm sure they make great gifts for the folks as well. So what I find fascinating about this is Piers Morgan Uncensored, but he's desperate to censor, everyone else. And what I love about that is like, no, you've got to take the title more literally. It's Piers Morgan Uncensored, not uncensored.
Not everyone
with
else
Piers Morgan. It's just him. But the thing about this, it's utterly remarkable how he seems staggered. You're just like, I don't like Nick Fuentes. Yeah, I don't think he should be banned. Mm-hmm. That's not a contradiction.
There's a whole bunch of sort of low-key sort of white paternalism stuff going in there. I mean, first of all, the comment to you, like, as a black man, as if you weren't aware or something like that. Second of all, you can have a black supremacist channel calling for the genocide of the whites, and you won't even be kicked out of Harvard. I mean, there was that Harvard
that's true,
who did that, and he would never have one of those guys.
Well, black people can't be racist, right? So.
Yeah, like he would never sort of call that out. He's got such a paternalistic attitude towards
this. Do you know that the thing with this as well is because the very first thing I asked him when we sat down and the camera started rolling is, he asked me a question, and the first question I asked was, do you support freedom of speech? Right? Because if he said no, or like, no, not absolutely, then okay, like that's a different conversation. The hypocrisy is, and look, the truth is, I would say globally, I don't think most people support freedom of speech, not in the way that we do. I don't think that's the majority view worldwide, especially when you think of how large the populations are in China, in India, in the Middle East, in parts of Africa, and so on.
Well, huge parts of the world won't, just because of the religious aspect.
Yes, exactly.
Can't criticize.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. The idea that you should just that's not common even within Europe.
Yeah,
it's actually a very American.
It's a very Anglo thing.
Very Anglo.
And the English-speaking world is where.
But even in the UK, I think most people in the UK support the hate speech laws that exist. Right. I would wager that. So I think the way that you and we see freedom of speech, it's actually a minority position. So if someone is opposed to it or they think, look, we should have all these limits, I would rather they just say that. I would rather they just say, actually, and I've had conversations like this with people, right? If you talk to most honest, say Muslim people, for example, right? And you say, for speech, they're like, no, actually, there's things that I don't think you should be allowed to say. There are things I think you can say that, no, you shouldn't be. There'll be people who think, no, you shouldn't be able to say this about, the king or the queen or about religion or about God and I'd rather people just say that. If that's your position, I'm like, cool, just say it. And then we can actually have that discussion.
But he's trying to have it both ways.
Instead of saying, yeah, I support freedom of speech, but I don't.
Because the whole framing of his show is he's against cancel culture.
Yes.
He's against oppression of speech. And so it's like, okay, Piers, and then his only response is, but that's hate speech.
Yeah.
It's like,
the thing that's strange is, look,
you didn't think about that.
But the thing is, what we were just saying, I could come up with a very strong argument that Piers Morgan has engaged in hate speech.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I can literally pull up to, especially from that pandemic era, you can pull up tweets of things that he said about a specific demographic of people.
Hate against
right? You will never find any clip, any tweet, anything from me of saying a certain demographic, a certain group of people should be denied basic rights or should be denied health care. You won't find that. I can find it from him.
Yeah.
Right. And then on top of that, this is not my perspective, but lots of the stuff he says about, against the trans movement and so on. We all know there are lefties out there who are like, hey, that's transphobic.
Well, they hate him for exactly those reasons.
Exactly. So that's where I find the additional layer where I'm just like, can you not see how this could be just totally redirected towards you? And towards probably
he's been on the receiving end of it.
Exactly.
That's why this show exists.
Yes, I know. That's why it's strange.
Yeah. And it's just so bizarre to me that he lives in this constant state of unresolved tension where it's like, well, I'm against cancel culture, but that's hate speech. Yeah. I'm against lockdowns or, I'm against violations of human rights, but these guys don't deserve health care. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, it's not strongly principled. And look, one of the sad realities I've had is that most people aren't that principled. When push really, really comes to shove and it gets uncomfortable, right? Like, because that's what he was testing with me.
Yeah.
Right? That's why he went to the white supremacist talking point kind of thing. Because it was like, okay, let's test your resolve on this one. Right? And I think actually as an interviewer, that's a good question because it's like, all right, do you really believe? Because if I'm not truly principled, I'll be like, oh no, actually that shouldn't be. And then someone can be like, so you don't really hold it.
So let me push you in a different way. Then.
Sure, go ahead.
What about, do you support free speech up until the point of promoting transgenderism to kids and trying to get them to convert and all that kind of stuff? Because I think that would have been a better question.
So the question is that free speech? Because free speech is about political concepts.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think. I think generally speaking, with everything, there's a line between children and adults.
Yeah.
Right. So if someone is like explicitly targeting certain types of messaging, this could even be advertising, right? Oh, yeah. I think it's fair enough to advertise cigarettes to you. If someone's there advertising cigarettes to 8-year-olds, I'm like,
fair point,
right? You see what I mean?
But this is why it's never a free speech question of why the advertisers can't advertise cigarettes.
Yeah,
no one's on the other side of that. Even the advertisers aren't like, but our free speech.
I think certainly, I think certainly when it comes to adults, yes, I would defend the right of some of the craziest trans activists to be out there saying their crazy positions. And part of the reason why I'm also, even though people are influenced, ultimately, look, you're always going to have people who believe in bad ideas and sometimes even bad arguments. But if you let everybody speak and you throw all the ideas out there, you can crush those type of the person who's the trans activist who's out there saying that men can be women or women can be men or men should be in women's sports or it's a good idea to cut off your genitals or whatever. I'm not like there's no fear there, right? If there is someone who's actually out there saying that like, all X color people should be like kicked out of.
Well, is that why the right wing generally like free speech? Because it helps our arguments when the left make theirs.
Well, it's the only reason the left has to censor.
Give them the rope to hang themselves.
Exactly.
Their arguments are so bad that they have to censor the opposition.
Exactly.
Because if the opposing view is heard, it destroys their argument.
Well, we built a whole podcast on playing what lefties think.
Yeah.
And then just pointing at it and saying,
well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like libs of TikTok, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like libs of TikTok posts no original content.
Yeah.
It's just like, look at this, look at this, right? And then the lefties get mad at it. And I'm like, it's literally just amplifying what progressives are actually saying.
They dox her, they chase her down, they try and get her censored. And it's like, but that's literally what you put up.
Right.
That's your opinion, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I know it's devastating to our case, actually.
Yes.
No one is saying that, but it's good that they are.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I thought we'd go on.
Oh boy.
This is a quick thing. Like, everyone really got upset by this. And I mean, I don't think anyone would accuse me of being a Piers Morgan defender, but he's not actually Hitler.
No.
Like, he's not.
So I'm what's wrong here?
Right. So Zuby took a selfie with Piers Morgan and posted it. And as you can see by Scotty here, the "I'll talk to anyone, even those I disagree with" argument should never apply to scumbags like Piers Morgan. Where to end a cozy chat with Tony Blair?
I chat with Tony Blair.
Yeah, I would chat with Tony Blair too.
I'd love to chat with Tony Blair. That'd be awesome.
I hate Tony Blair. But the point is, like, Piers Morgan, insufferable, but he's not actually the architect of all of these things. And even if he was, you still need to be able to hold him account by talking to him.
This is what I mean when I talk about the woke right. Right? The woke right is becoming increasingly obvious online, because this is exactly what the lefties do.
Well, what it is,
this is exactly why someone on the left can't take a picture with Ben Shapiro,
so that I could call him a scumbag and then give him all the reasons why he is.
But it's also,
I still have the conversation.
You are right. This is exactly what the left do.
Exactly
it's the total politicization of every aspect of human interaction.
Exactly.
Right. So you can't even stand next to Piers Morgan without being politically implicated in anything now. Even if, like you say, you went on his podcast and you told him, "No, Piers, you're wrong about everything. Yes, bring back Nick Fuentes. I don't care." You know, like you can be in total opposition to everything he thinks. And yet, by association, now you are.
We took the picture
exactly,
because people keep doubling down on. But you took a selfie and you're smiling.
There's a very similar one. What was it? Was it Jimmy Fallon who ruffled Trump's hair on his show?
Oh, really? Yeah,
do you not remember? Like this happened like in 2017 or 2016 or something. Yeah. Trump was on, like, I think it was Jimmy Fallon's show, and he was like, "Is that real hair?" And Trump was like, "Yeah, it's real hair. Feel it." And he ruffled his hair, and everyone was like, "You can't do that. That humanizes Trump." And it's like, okay. Listen, lunatics, he is a human. Yes. And, and that's okay. He's your next president.
Do you know what it is as well? Is like, and look, my view and principles on this, I get are different from different people's, right? But I think you also have to be better than people.
Yeah.
In a way, right? Not in like a superiority sense, but like, look, why are we mad at Piers?
Because he's a piece of ass.
Right. But specifically, all these people, they're mad because of what he said and what he said during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right. That's why all these people are angry. These are all people who
justifiably
are very exactly. So, is the best approach to start talking about him in the way that we're critical of him talking about us, or is it better? Okay, he reached out an olive branch and said, "Okay, let's have you on the show. You're back in the country. I'd like to, Piers Morgan, he likes chatting to me. I've noticed." So I'm like, okay, cool. So let's come on and let's have a conversation. If you refuse to converse, you cannot change your mind.
Yeah.
You can't get someone to shift their position if you absolutely refuse to talk to them. This is the same thing that the censors don't get when they were just willy-nilly kicking people off of all the social media platforms. If you are concerned about some people's views, you think, oh, they're a bit too far gone or whatever. It's like, all right, let's chat to them and reel them back in. If I have someone, especially someone I care about, and I start seeing them going, it doesn't matter which end, right? It's all right. You're going too far in that way.
We talked earlier in the podcast about peak woke.
Yeah.
You got to remember that for at least 20 or 30 years before that, the left withdrew from all conversation with the right.
Yes.
And their ability to advance arguments atrophied to the point where they can no longer do it. I mean, if you ever meet an old lefty, you have to be somebody in their 60s at least, they can still make principled left-wing arguments.
Yes.
But the younger generation, they simply cannot do it because they have done what basically this guy is advocating for here.
Yeah, for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And then you've just got, where you've got more silos and more echo chambers. Yeah. And you're more likely to be blindsided by something.
And no one changes
the
innovation of the skills as well.
Yeah.
Like the dialogue is a skill.
Yes.
That's the thing. And you've got to make sure you're able to do it.
And I think that, look, the best way to, and I get not everyone has the temperament and personality type for it. But if you do, you can really walk people back from the brink by actually being kind and polite and whatever, right? I've never actually met a real white supremacist as far as I'm aware.
Okay? I'd like you to meet one.
But if I did, and I really just I had a chat with him and I spent time with him, I think it would be really hard for them to maintain the all black people are terrible or a criminal or what, right? Especially if they met like multiple guys like me, right? Not just me, but if you, it's pretty hard to hold on to that level of bigotry when someone is very directly like just proving you wrong. Right.
Well, one thing I've noticed as well is
it's why I'm not scared of those ideas. Oh no one can even voice that. I'm just like, no, like let them voice it. And
the way you're framing this is very interesting because it's a very human centric take, right? Because you're like, well, the person is a valuable thing in themselves,
absolutely.
And if they're being dragged into a realm of extreme politicization, then it's good for them to be brought back to a reasonable perspective rather than just cut off and allowed to fester in this silo of hateful ideas.
Be welcomed into the arms of people who are even more.
Exactly. But that's a very kind way of approaching things. Whereas a lot of people on the left and these sorts of people were like, no, Piers Morgan is forever an evil. And it's like, well, he's going to be forever an idiot. But like maybe he could have some sort of redemption.
Do you know the thing as well? I asked Piers about redemption because, he wants Alex Jones banned forever. And I was like, look, this thing happened over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? I asked
and
him,
he's paid the price.
Yes. What should the
and actually, that wasn't the reason he was kicked off these platforms either.
I know.
Yeah.
It was for, harassing
Oliver Darcy.
Yeah, exactly. So look, I can, the thing is, I can understand why people think like this. I'm simply like, look, this is not my MO. I've experienced this a lot of times. I've interviewed Andrew Tate multiple times. I've interviewed Tristan. I've had conversations with like a lot of people who are considered controversial or who are polarizing or whatever. When I posted a selfie with Andrew Tate,
I bet you got a bit of backlash for that.
Yeah, plenty of backlash. I posted a selfie last year with Cornel West. Plenty of backlash, right? I posted right. It doesn't matter, left, right, whatever. And I'm just like, look, I was in New York at an event. And I had a really good conversation with Cornel West. First time we met, he was very polite to me, very kind, really interested in what I had to say. We had a good conversation. It wasn't like hard political. We just talked to each other as human beings. And then I was like, cool, like let's take a picture. I think he even suggested, he was like, yeah, let's take a selfie. And I was like, cool, let's take it. I post it. Most people are like, oh, cool. Some people are like, oh, like I don't like that guy's ideas, but cool, you met him. And then other people are, oh my gosh, I've lost all respect for you, or I can't believe. I'm like, yeah. This is when I think people lose their humanity when they just see people quite literally as their politics and their opinions, rather than seeing the human as a human being who has political ideas and opinions. And I can get that I can see why it can be hard for people to separate those sometimes, especially if you are not really. We meet so many people and we chat to a lot of people for a living.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't,
and also they turn them into a kind of idol. As well, I've known, they essentially, if you had Piers Morgan's face on your timeline all day, every day, and it was just Piers Morgan is evil all day, every day, he becomes kind of like the Goldstein figure. It's like all I think of him in this, whenever he comes up, is a political idol that I want to tear down.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, he's not that important.
Yeah, you're actually giving people too much credit.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's Trump derangement syndrome, isn't it? You're basically just saying, let's not do whatever this is, Morgan derangement syndrome.
Exactly. Let's get a more level perspective on the fact that he is an idiot and a human being. It's fine.
The thing is as well,
idiot first.
There's even another level on top of this, and I don't think he's an idiot because he's not an unintelligent person. All right,
I've seen enough of this podcast.
I don't think he's an unintelligent person, man. The thing is as well is like. He is influential. Yes.
Yeah.
Probably at least 100 million people know who he is. Right? And he's got a voice. He's got a daily program. He broadcasts in the US, he broadcasts in the UK or whatever. Why was it even important to have this conversation? Because if I can nudge him towards my position and at least open his mind to let him hear the alternative position, which he might not be hearing from anyone else or from anyone else sensible, and then he can mull on it, and maybe he won't change his view.
Well, and you don't even necessarily need to convince him.
It's not about
his audience as well. Yeah. The audience, right? There's people sitting at home. They've never really thought that deeply.
And if you hadn't showed up, it would just be those two women who just agreed with him on everything.
Exactly.
And it would honestly, I think just the argument against the concept of hate speech is valuable enough in and of itself.
Yes.
No, look, it's totally arbitrary. It's entirely subjective.
Yeah.
This can't be a legal standard.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important for people to hear that.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that is on the site, such as the Lads Hours, this episode with Right Said Fred talking about music. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.